The wind moaned low through the desert grass as the sun bled out across the horizon. Dust swirled around the hooves of a lone horse, its rider, broad-shouldered, weathered by years of ranch life, guiding it slowly along the empty road. His name was Elias, a man who had seen the frontier's cruelty, yet still carried a steady light in his eyes. As he rounded the bend near the dry gulch, his lantern caught something strange on the roadside. A burlap sack, tied cruelly with rope, lay motionless in the dirt. For a moment, it looked like nothing more than discarded feed. But then, he heard it, a sound. Faint, a whimper. Elias dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. He knelt, pressing a calloused hand against the rough fabric. The sack trembled ever so slightly. His breath caught. With his knife, he sawed through the rope, the lantern swinging, throwing shadows like restless ghosts. The moment the sack opened, his world shifted. Inside was a young woman, no more than her early 20s. Her face was bruised, lips cracked from thirst, hair matted with dirt. She struggled to focus, eyes fluttering open, pale as the dying moonlight. Her voice came in a rasp, each word fighting for air. "Don't witness my ruin." The words fell heavy, like a confession meant for the earth itself. And then her body went limp, head collapsing against his chest. Elias froze, lantern trembling in his grasp. Shock rippled through him, not just at the cruelty of what he'd found, but at the weight of her plea. Who would cast a daughter of God into the dust like garbage? What kind of evil walked these lands now? He gathered her into his arms, feeling the brittle bones beneath torn fabric, and whispered low, "You're safe now." Whoever did this won't have the last word. The horse shifted uneasily behind him, as if it too sensed the danger in the night. Above, the desert sky deepened into black, stars burning cold and merciless. Elias stood there a moment longer, holding her fragile form, before stepping toward the ranch lights glowing faint on the horizon. The west was merciless. But he would not be. Long before Elias brushed the leaves aside, cruelty had already written its mark on her life. The night had begun in a haze of whiskey and rage. Inside the creaking shack at the edge of town, her stepfather sat slumped at a table, cards scattered, a bottle clutched in his fist. He had gambled away nearly everything, except her. To him, she wasn't family. She was currency. "Girl," he slurred, staggering to his feet, "you'll marry the man I say. He'll pay my debts, and you'll keep that mouth shut." Her reply came sharp, though her voice trembled. "I'd rather starve than be sold." The slap cracked across her cheek, the sound echoing through the hollow room. She stumbled, tasted blood, but refused to bow. "You think you've got a choice?" he growled, dragging her by the wrist toward the door. "I'll end you before I let you shame me." Moonlight spilled across the dirt road as he hauled her toward the canyon. His boots ground against the earth, hers scraped helplessly behind. She clawed at his grip, gasped for air, but he was deaf to mercy. At the canyon's edge, he ripped a burlap sack from the wagon, forcing her inside like she was nothing more than grain. Her muffled cry broke the silence as he yanked the rope tight around the mouth of the bag. She kicked. She writhed. Her fists pounded against the rough fabric, but he laughed, a hollow, drunken sound. "Let the desert take you," he spat, shoving the sack down onto the dirt. "By morning, buzzards will finish what I started." The footsteps grew faint as he walked away, bottle clinking against his belt. The sound of him vanished into the dark. Inside, she fought for air. Her chest heaved, lungs burning as dust filled her throat. She twisted her wrists against the rope until skin tore. Above, the wind carried the shriek of a hawk and the rustle of circling wings. Buried in the sack, she whispered hoarsely, to no one, to God, to the night itself, "Don't let this be the end." And then, silence pressed down. Only the desert listened. Elias carried her like she was made of glass, every step deliberate, the lantern swinging against the night. His horse snorted nervously, hooves crunching through dry gravel, but the rancher's grip never faltered. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, just bone, bruises, and fading breath. By the time they reached the ranch, the sky had darkened to ink. A single lantern glowed in the window of his cabin. the only warmth for miles. He shouldered the door open, boots echoing against the wooden floor, and laid her gently upon a bed of hay beside the fire. Her eyelids fluttered. She coughed, voice rough as gravel. "Why, help me?" Elias poured water into a tin cup, holding it to her lips. She drank greedily, then winced as the cool liquid met cracked skin. He studied her face in the firelight. So young, yet already carved with suffering. "Because someone has to," he said quietly. She shivered beneath the blanket he tucked around her shoulders. For a long moment she was silent. Then, with trembling hands, she pushed the hair from her face and spoke again. "My stepfather. Her voice broke. She forced the words through clenched teeth. "He tried to sell me. And when I fought him, he buried me like an animal." Elias's jaw tightened. His fingers curled around the cup until metal bent beneath his grip. "No man has the right," he muttered, more to himself than her. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She turned away, ashamed of her own weakness. "Don't look at me," she whispered. "Don't see what he's made of me." Elias leaned closer, his voice steady, low, like the rumble of thunder before rain. "I don't see what he did. I see what he couldn't break." The fire cracked between them, sparks rising into the shadows. Outside, the desert stretched cold and silent. But inside, beneath the hum of crickets and the pop of burning wood, something fragile had been saved, if only for tonight. He sat vigil beside her, shotgun resting against his knee, eyes fixed on the door. Whatever evil had left her in that sack, Elias vowed it would not cross this threshold again, not while he breathed. Morning light spilled across the valley, painting the ranch in muted gold. The young woman stirred restlessly on the cot, her body healing, though her spirit still flinched at every creak of wood. Elias fed the horses, but his mind never left the cabin. He knew the frontier well enough. Evil never let go without a fight. By midday, whispers had already reached him. In town, her stepfather had staggered into the saloon, red-eyed and mean, demanding whiskey and spreading poison with every word. "She's mine," he'd snarled to anyone listening. "Run off if she wants, but she'll crawl back. I'll drag her by the hair if I have to." Back at the ranch, evening fell. A quiet unease settled over the land. The girl sat by the fire, clutching a cup with trembling hands. She looked at Elias, her eyes pleading. "He'll come. He always does." Elias loaded shells into his shotgun, the sound sharp in the silence. "Then I'll be waiting." Hooves thundered in the distance. The dogs barked, restless. Elias stepped onto the porch, lantern swinging in the night wind. Out of the shadows rode a single figure. The stepfather, slouched in the saddle, a pistol gleaming at his hip. He reined up at the gate, sneer twisting his face. "You got something of mine, rancher," he spat. Elias's voice came steady, like iron drawn from the earth. "She's not yours, not now. Not ever." The outlaw's laugh was ugly, broken. "You think a shotgun changes blood? She'll always carry my mark." Elias lifted the weapon, the lantern light catching on steel. "Step off my land." For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Only the cicadas hummed, only the horses shifted in the dark. The outlaw's hand hovered near his pistol, but then he cursed, spitting into the dust. "This ain't over," he growled, turning his horse back into the shadows. Not by a damn sight. The echo of hooves faded, but dread remained. Inside, the girl pressed a hand to her chest, breathing fast. Elias closed the door behind him, eyes hard as flint. "He'll come again," she whispered. "Yes," Elias said, settling the shotgun against the wall. "But so will I." The town sat heavy under the noon sun, its dirt streets shimmering like molten brass. Elias rode in slow, the young woman seated carefully behind him, clutching the back of his coat. Each hoofbeat drew curious stares. Folks paused on porches, whispers carrying, "That's the rancher," and "the gambler's girl." At the sheriff's office, Elias helped her down, steadying her trembling legs. Sheriff Daniels waited at the doorway, a tall man with a lined face, hat shadowing eyes that had seen too much of men's sins. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old tobacco. The sheriff pulled out a chair, nodding for her to sit. She hesitated, then lowered herself, eyes downcast, fingers twisting the edge of her dress. "Tell me," Daniels said, voice low, deliberate. What happened to you? Her lips parted, but no words came. Her throat tightened. The memory still raw, still bleeding. She glanced at Elias. His nod was small, steady, like a hand on her back. My stepfather, she began, voice trembling. He tried to sell me. When I fought, he buried me like dirt. Silence filled the room. The sheriff leaned forward, elbows on the desk, jaw clenched. You willing to stand by those words? In court, before the judge? She froze. The weight of the question pressed on her chest like stone. She remembered the bruises, the sack, the dirt in her lungs. But she also remembered his threats, the years of control. Her voice broke. He'll kill me if I speak. Elias stepped closer, his hand resting firm on the back of her chair. Not while I'm standing, he said. The sheriff's eyes shifted between them. His tone hardened, heavy with truth. Men like him don't stop till someone stops them. Law's thin out here, but it's all we've got. If you want justice, you'll have to grab it with both hands. The girl drew a ragged breath. She nodded, small at first, then stronger. I'll testify. The sheriff leaned back, nodding slowly. Then we'll be ready. But know this, he won't come quiet. The desert has a way of bringing devils out at night. Elias's jaw tightened. He met the sheriff's gaze, voice steady as stone. Then let the night come. Night bled over the desert like ink poured on sand. The town of Dry Creek went quiet, its lamps flickering weak against the shadows. Somewhere out beyond the horizon, coyotes wailed, their cries carried by the wind like an omen. Inside the sheriff's office, the girl sat on a narrow cot, her hands clasped tight, knuckles white. Elias leaned against the wall, Winchester rifle propped close, eyes fixed on the window as if he could feel trouble long before it showed. Sheriff Daniels sat at his desk, lantern light cutting his face in half man, half shadow. Then it came. Hooves, many of them. Slow, deliberate, like thunder creeping closer. The sheriff stood, hand resting on the butt of his revolver. Elias shifted, his voice low. They're here. Out in the street, 6 riders appeared. Their silhouettes loomed tall against the pale moon. At their front, her stepfather, his hat brim low, his grin cruel even in the dark. He pulled the reins, his horse stamping restless in the dirt. Daniels! He barked, voice cutting through the night. You've got something of mine. The sheriff stepped out onto the porch, rifle leveled, steady. Elias followed, standing to his side. The girl stayed just behind the doorway, her breath shallow, her eyes wide. She ain't yours, Daniels called back. His voice was calm, but steel ran through it. The stepfather chuckled, spitting in the dirt. You think a piece of paper law's gonna stop me? I raised her. I own her. Elias stepped forward, the firelight from the lantern catching his face. His voice carried like iron hammered on an anvil. You buried her in the ground like a dog. She ain't yours. She never was. The riders shifted, restless, hands brushing the grips of pistols. The sheriff cocked his rifle, the click sharp in the silence. The girl, trembling, pushed herself forward into the doorway. No, she shouted, voice cracking but fierce. You don't own me anymore. For the first time, her stepfather's grin faltered. His eyes narrowed, shadow hardening across his face. Then, with a flick of his hand, he gave the signal. The night erupted in gunfire,